Alexander Verbeek joins us now from New York. Alexander is the founder of the Planetary Security Initiative. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Verbeek. You know, these people who are marching around the world, they want their politicians to take the initiative. Let me read you a couple of quotes. You might recognize who said this. You don't listen to the science because you are only interested in solutions that will enable you to carry on like before. That was directed at politicians. And then, most recently, she said this: I have a dream that the powerful take the climate crisis seriously. The time for their fairy tales is over. That's Greta Thunberg, the Swedish climate activist. Do those quotes ring true to you?
Yes, clearly. Basically everything that she says is very much the same way that I think. I know her quite well, actually. She demonstrates not far away from my home in Stockholm, so we've met quite a few times. And I think it's amazing what she has created in just 1 year time. I mean, imagine, 1 year ago, she was sitting there all alone in September 2018. And now today, there's millions of young people joined by adults that are fully embracing what she is saying, that it's time to act. We can no longer wait, and we have to embrace the facts that are presented to us by the scientists.
How do the politicians who don't take the climate crisis seriously enough, how do they react when people tell them that the Greenland ice sheet is in the middle of its biggest melt season in recorded history, or that, for example, cement is responsible for 8% of the world's CO2 emissions? If the cement industry was a country, it would be the third largest emitter of CO2 in the world. What does a politician say to evidence like that when they don't want to take action against the crisis?
Well, I think the denial of science is a number of things given by those that have an interest for, let's say, a short-term interest, that have interest for, that represent the interest of the business that wants higher profits on their next quarterly financial review. So it's short-term, it is going for quick gain. And therefore you have to deny the problems that you have to invest in for the future. I mean, it's the same in your house, you know. If your roof is leaking, you could say, you know, if it's not raining tomorrow, we don't have a problem. But at the end of the day, the bill is going to be much, much bigger. And so politicians chosen by us, the people, should lead for the long term. That is why we want them there, not just for the short-term gains. And that's, I think, a message that many people that are out today in the streets are feeling. It is time to act and to really look at all the facts that we have, and we can no longer wait with taking action.
Well, Donald Trump's new ambassador to the United Nations, Kelly Craft, has said she believes both sides of the science when it comes to the climate crisis. So maybe that's reflective of the opinion in the White House. Alexander, where do you stand on our current position as humanity? There are some scientists, many who say we do have 12 years from now to take the drastic measures that are needed. But other scientists say, actually, we need to stop all emissions right now at this very moment.
Well, ideally, you would stop today with all emissions worldwide. But of course that is not possible. I still have to fly home to Stockholm. I'm now in New York, as you can see behind me. So we have to take action, and the way that the scientists have formulated this is that we have basically the next decade to reduce half of our emissions, and then by mid-century we should live carbon neutral. But that doesn't mean that we have one more decade to keep partying on this planet like everybody is doing and then take action. You need to take action today to make it possible that we get that reduction. So there's no reason to wait. Waiting is costing lives, it's costing money, it is making everything much more complicated and much more expensive. And this is the right moment to act. We should act today.
Give us some good news. I'll give you one. This is a nice one. More than 50% of all cars sold in Norway in June were fully electric. Oslo, the capital, is planning on eventually becoming completely car-free. There are actions that can be taken. China is building massive, massive solar farms. Give us some other examples around the world where we can take encouragement from.
Well, we have only a few minutes. I could talk for hours about all the good news of solar panels getting cheaper, and I could talk about all the renewable energy we're working on and the wind energy. But in the short time that we have, I think it's much more important to focus on the message that although there is a lot of good news, we have to focus on the bad news and take action. So having more renewables is not the key thing. It is about having less emissions. So a country like China that is both building a lot of renewable energy, but is also still building new coal plants, is at the end of the day, it's a negative story. So if they would stop building coal plants and massively invest in more renewables, more than they are already doing, that would be the good story. And I'm talking here from the United States, where the story is much more negative than the Chinese story, because here the focus is actually so much more on promoting coal. Coal is the worst fossil fuel that we have. So yes, I can give you a lot of positive stories, because the positive news is the scientists tell us we can still keep climate change within kind of a range that we can easily live with it. But we can only do it if we act now. And that is the positive story, that we can still do it. But it asks for really drastic measures, because we waited too long. We didn't listen to the scientists 10, 20 years ago when we should have, and when it would have been so much easier and so much cheaper.
Doesn't the problem really come down to the philosophy of the way we live our lives? Could the problem not actually be democracy and capitalism, and how the two have this relationship where people who provide politicians with money to run their campaigns, and those politicians eventually get elected and then have this relationship with big business? In other words, do we need governments that represent green parties, that have green policies? And at the moment, those policies really are being driven by green parties around the world, but they're just not electable for some reason.
Yeah, I think it is not so much democracy. What I see today in the streets all over the world, that is true democracy. That is people that are standing up and give their opinion on what they want to see changed. And that is amazing, that millions of young people and adult people are out there in the street. The other point of the impact, the influence of business on democracy, yes, that is in quite a few countries very worrying, that the elected politicians by the people are much more focused on the interest of business, which is, as I said, short-term and often not taking into account the impact that they have on the environment, instead of the people that they are supposed to represent. And I never understand that those politicians that don't want to take effective action on climate change, they have children, they have grandchildren too. I mean, even if they would look in their own family, I mean, just read the reports of what our century is going to look like in the second half of this century and further afterwards. If we don't take action, we're going to get more drought, we're going to get more floodings, we're going to see more sea level rise, we're going to see massive amounts of hundreds of millions of people that are forced to move away from where they live now. Climate change is, you know, it's a kind of new enemy, a different kind of enemy than we had in the past. You know, it's not an army, it doesn't have a flag, it doesn't have a philosophy, but it is something that is really, really going to impact our lives. And we can beat it, but for that we need to work together. And yeah, democracy gets us there. But not so much business interest. So we have to change the way that we organize our economy. And that doesn't mean that we're going so much after business or that we're going after your hamburgers, you're not allowed to eat any meat anymore, that kind of thing. But we have to make a little bit of room, do a little bit of a step back, and in the meantime invest in a new economy. And there's a lot of jobs, and there's a lot of innovation, and there's so much that can be done there.
Alexander, you're very scary to listen to, but also extremely inspiring and interesting. Thanks so much for spending time with us on the News Hour. Alexander Verbeek is the founder of the Planetary Security Initiative. Take care.